I see something in the chat saying we're live now. Is that true?
Yes, please proceed. Thank you. Sorry,
Can
and
you tell us
apologies for the delay in getting started, and we're ready to pick back up.
So, were we cut off at the end of my comments?
If you'd actually like to start over.
Yes, please proceed.
Yep.
I'm sorry, say again. Were we cut off at the beginning of my comments or the end?
That is correct, towards the beginning, Becky.
Okay, well, let me try to shorten it up there. I'm guessing we're live. So let me just say, Dr. Cardona and I are smiling because for a couple of reasons. First of all, we've all been in this virtual environment for a year, and so this is not new for any of us. But he and I were chatting while you guys were offline, kind of like, yeah, when this happens in a middle school classroom, the students aren't just sitting quietly waiting for tech people to say, okay, we're back online. So we appreciate in this moment all that you have not only endured this year, but you have risen to the challenge. I have an eight-year-old grandson in my basement who is in third grade virtually and has been since the beginning of this school year. So I'm watching in real time the kinds of things our teachers and other educators are doing when things like this happen. And they have a classroom full of kids. So yeah, Dr. Cardona and I are really appreciative of all that you have done this year to make education work for our students despite challenges in internet access and all of the things that came your way. So let me just start there. So that's a good place to start, right? So thank you for being so patient. We know we are starting late now, so I'm going to shorten up my remarks and turn it over to Secretary Cardona, just saying to him, Mr. Secretary, we are so appreciative that you're here with us tonight, but most especially that you're bringing your educator heart to all of the work you're doing. And we are appreciative of the Biden administration, President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, in really taking seriously the promises they made to get control of the pandemic, to make investments in public education, to listen to educators, to lead on racial and social justice. And we saw that on full display last night as we listened to their comments after the verdict in the George Floyd, the verdict in the trial that was seeking justice for George Floyd. So with that, Mr. Secretary, please share with us a few comments.
Thank you very much, Becky. I'm honored to be here with you tonight, but even more excited about the work that we have ahead of us in partnership to really make sure that not only we recover, but our students thrive in ways that we never thought were even possible a year ago. You know, I know we both agree that getting back to what it was in March 2020 is not the goal. So I look forward to that partnership with you. And I really, really appreciate the opportunity to be with you and all of the listeners tonight. I first want to start off by expressing my condolences. I know you recently lost your mother. You know, my heart goes out to you and my wife. You know, we're thinking about you and your family as you grieve. And we wish you and your family the very best. You know, you mentioned our country is, you know, while we're talking about recovery, while we're talking about all the technical things in the American Rescue Plan, I know we're going to learn together and we're going to grow together, but we have to heal together. We have to heal as a country. And we have to heal in terms of how, in many cases, our students and our educators have felt around, number one, outcomes, disparate outcomes, but also how the profession has been treated. I really feel confident that we're going to move forward as a country in so many ways, and I look forward to being a part of that. So I always say we're going to heal, learn, and grow together, and that's what we're going to do. You know, since day one, I've been very clear about my goals, and I'm going to be very quick here, but I want to share to those who are in the audience. I want to, first of all, thank you. Thank you for everything you've done for this last year, everything before the pandemic. But, you know, I always say it doesn't take a pandemic for us to appreciate our educators, our teachers, our paraeducators, our custodians, our bus drivers, you know, but now people see the important, and people that maybe before didn't even pay attention now recognize that community and state growth, it starts with good education. And I want to thank you for your commitment, counselors, school leaders, district leaders, state leaders. Thank you for everything you've done. You've had to switch your job from one day to the next, totally. And I think the first 5 minutes of this call is a reminder we have to close the digital divide, right? And we have to get in the classroom as quickly and as safely as possible. There is no substitute for in-person learning. The only thing is, we got the luxury of having people right on there fixing it for us. For the educators that have been doing this and dealing with it, they have students sitting in their classroom and their Zoom goes out and they're trying to figure that out. Thank you. The message is thank you. But moving forward, we're going to try to reopen as quickly and safely as possible because there is no substitute for in-person learning. When we talk about equity, in-person learning, to me, is the best equity lever I can pull right now, because I know that no matter how well you have a connection, those interpersonal relationships that the teachers give to students in peer-to-peer interaction, that's critically important. So that's one of the major goals moving forward, especially since day one. But moving forward, listen, gaps existed way before the pandemic. In fact, ever since we started collecting data, so we have to aggressively and unapologetically address what Pedro Noguera calls, and I refer to as the normalization of failure, where for decades now, there's a normalized difference in outcomes of students based on place and race, where they live and race in many cases. So we have to address that, and we have to be open and honest about how to fix that. I believe strongly that we have to look at what I call college and career readiness 2.0. How are our middle and high schools evolving to make sure that we're meeting the workforce demands that exist right now? So all of our students have an opportunity to go into college or into the career, whether it's a 2-year program, a certification program, 4-year college. How do we do that? How do we create those pathways for our students and support them so that they all have access to success in life, right? Higher education, providing more equitable access and affordable access. College can't be a sentence of debt for the rest of your life. That's unacceptable. We can do better, and we will do better. So that's another major focus. At the home front, interagency work, making sure that the Department of Education works closely with the Department of Housing and Urban Development, with Department of Labor, with the Department of Health and Human Services, to make sure that we're working together, because we serve the same families, we serve the same people. So we have to remove silos and work together, but also foster an environment across the country where educators are learning from educators, leaders are learning from leaders, because we know that's how you learn best. So as an agency, we need to be a service agency and make sure that we're lifting up best practices. And I hope I have an opportunity to share some of those best practices that I've seen across the country. I visited about 6 or 7 states, and what I'm seeing is what I want to lift up, right? So many great things happening. And part of that is controlling the narrative. In education, for far too long, we've always been on defense, responding to what other people say we do. It's time to control the narrative now. It's time to say, this is what we do for our schools, for communities, and for children, and honor the profession the way it deserves to be honored. That's a really important thing that together we can accomplish a lot more. NEA will be a very important part of this work moving forward for the agency and for our country. And I look forward to collaboration. Everyone has been forced to collaborate at a different level this past year. Let us not become complacent. Let us not lose that sense of urgency that we've had over this past year to close the digital divide, to make sure students have access to quality laptop and quality content on the other side of that screen, but also opportunities to get into the classroom and get that social emotional support that we know they need. We need to start with that. So let's not lose the urgency. Let's continue to work together. Our kids need us now more than ever. I look at this, Becky, as an opportunity. We are in a pandemic, and there's no other time in our country's history that I can think of where we have the opportunity to hit reset on some things that we know don't work. And that's going to take bold leadership. That's going to take good collaboration, and that's going to take teamwork. And I'm committed to making sure that we have NEA's voice at the table so that we could do the best for our very kids. They deserve it, and they've been waiting. Honored to be here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Secretary Cardona. I really appreciate you lifting up the theme of collaboration, which is something that when I started the presidency, I talked about what I call dynamic collaboration and alignment, and what we are working on internally is what we need to work on throughout this country. So not only collaborating with us, but all of the other stakeholders, and to be thinking deeply. It's one of the things that we asked the Biden administration to think about. So I'm glad you mentioned it, is that interagency collaboration, because we know that if our students are hungry, they can't learn. If
Right.
they don't have a house to live in, they can't. So it's important to hear from you in your role that you intend to do that in an authentic way. And so we appreciate hearing that from you. So I have to tell you, we put out the call and we got thousands of questions. Everyone wants clamoring to ask you a question. We did our best to try to bring questions to you tonight that reflect the very diverse membership categories that we have, from teachers to our support staff, as well as the diversity of issues and concerns and ideas that our membership has. So we've tried to miraculously narrow that down a little bit. So we'll see how we do. So the first question that I'm going to ask you to tee us up is, just kind of tell us what inspired you to go into teaching, and how you use your educator experience and lived experience to inform your day-to-day decisions now that you're in this really powerful position as Secretary of Education.
Thank you. So, going into middle and high school, I didn't really know kind of what I wanted to do. I went to a technical high school, which was a great experience. I studied automotive for 4 years. And I went to that school because my older cousin went there, and there were like, 10 or 15 cousins in the same area. And we all kind of followed the big cousin, right? We're a tight Puerto Rican family. We're always together. And so he went to one school and we all kind of followed like little ducks following him, right? So I went there and it was a great experience for me because I got to learn a trade, but I met some amazing educators. And one teacher told me, she said, you should consider going into teaching. I knew I always wanted to go into the service field, serve my community, because I feel like I've been given so much in this community. And I'm thinking to myself, maybe teaching, I don't know. So I was going to become an art teacher because I love the arts. I love painting, drawing, and music. So I was going to be an art teacher, but I gravitated toward the elementary age students, and I taught 4th grade. I loved it. I wanted to do that for my whole career, to be honest with you. And that connection to students, that ability to help students and families, that has never left me. Those values, that my why hasn't changed from day one. Being able to help students, being able to help families. Education for me, public education for me, was the equalizer. We hear that a lot. It allowed me to, expand. Like I wasn't planning on being here. I wasn't planning on being Secretary of Education. I wanted to serve. I wanted to serve my community. And I'm blessed now that I'm Secretary of Education, but those same values drive me, that same passion, that urgency to help children, especially those children who have to work twice or 3 times as hard, or those families, to make it. I want to make sure that education provides those opportunities like it did for me. So as Secretary of Education, I'm always thinking about those Chris Garcias, that Carlo Rodriguez in my class, that Josh, who, great kids. I make decisions thinking about them. And whether I was a school principal, a district administrator, commissioner of education in Connecticut, even college instructor, it's always about how can we support students, how can we help students grow and thrive, not only academically, but emotionally, and feel good about themselves and who they are to be successful in life. So the values haven't changed, the titles did, but it's still the same passion that drives me.
Thank you. Thank you. And I know some people are just joining us. I want to, again, apologize for the technical difficulties we had at the outset. You missed a fabulous introduction by me. Is that right, Secretary?
It was amazing. It was amazing. I hope they recorded it.
But I apologize for that. And we're working to make up that time to make sure that your voices are heard. So part of it, and part of the introduction that I made, I talked about the commitment that the Biden administration has to racial and social justice. And I know in their selection of you, Dr. Cardona, they they were looking at that. They were looking for someone who shared that commitment. Given that you do, and the experience that you've had, can you talk a little bit about how you'll lead with that as you lead the department, and how you plan on partnering with members of the education community to ensure every student's right to equitable access and opportunity and just rights
Yeah.
that were threatened not too long ago?
Yeah, definitely. You know, from day one, as an educator and throughout my years and different roles that I've had, there's value. I always say the smartest person in the room is the room itself, right? Somebody said that. I don't know who it was. I can't give proper credit because I don't know. But you know, when you bring people together with different perspectives, and you may not always agree, but there's so much value in listening to diverse perspectives to make sure that whatever you come up with takes into account the feelings, the background experiences, and the perceptions of others. So for me, that's always been how I do business. And the success that I've had, whether it was as a principal, it wasn't because I came in with the greatest ideas. I know you can't lead through memos. I know that. You know, it's about bringing people together and giving them an opportunity to have input in how things are being developed, so that there's that authentic ownership and engagement in the decision-making, you know, in the work that we're doing. So that's always been how I do business, because I think that's what leads to success for students, right? We're keeping the students at the center. So, you know, as Commissioner of Education, when the pandemic hit, well, prior to the pandemic, I worked closely with the union leads in Connecticut. I know Jeff and Don, I hope they're on. And then during the pandemic, we had to ratchet that up a little bit to say, listen, we got to get out of this together, and I need you at the table. And, you know, for all of you that are on this call now, know that wasn't easy. That was probably the most difficult time to lead, to teach, to do anything in a school, in our careers. And we relied on collaboration. And what I found is across the country, as I'm traveling, those groups that are most successful are the ones that invest in relationships at all different levels and collaborate, authentic collaboration, not just in front of the cameras or, you know, in front of a board meeting. Authentic collaboration, good dialogue, problem solving together. That's where I see them finding success with school reopening. So I know that that's the right formula, and that's how I always led, and that's not going to change now. I want to make sure not only that I do that, but that the agency that I work in now, that I lead, has that culture too. And I've met some amazing folks at the Department of Education. Our career staff are amazing. Some of the folks that we're bringing on, and I know that, you know, we're going to double down on the fact that this is a service agency. We work in partnership to help lift students, and that's what we're going to do.
So thank you so much. And I want to share that, you know, we really appreciate that. Even as you're doing your world tour or your country tour, I'll say it that way, that one of the things that the NEA asked for you to consider is visiting those places where that collaboration was in place, labor management collaboration. And you and I got a chance to do that when we went out to Western Pennsylvania to see that collaboration between the union president and the superintendent, and how they work together along with the support staff and the nurses and counselors. It was quite remarkable how they were able to come together, as well as visiting some schools that are employing the community schools model that the NEA has been leading on. So we appreciate that you're getting that opportunity to see that. So we have some questions from our members. And so we're going to go to the first question from one of our members in your home state of Connecticut. Are we ready to put that up?
Hello, I'm Kristen Record, a physics teacher from Stratford, Connecticut, and the 2011 Connecticut State Teacher of the Year. Over the last year, our students have faced unprecedented challenges. Between losing loved ones, adapting to distance learning, and missing out on a year of regular social interactions, they've had their worlds turned upside down. But with the new administration and resources from the American Rescue Plan, We have an unprecedented opportunity to reshape public education. One of those opportunities is reimagining how we assess student achievement. Can you share with us how you envision the future of assessments?
Dr. Cardona?
So nice to see you, Kristen. Friends here from Stratford, amazing educator and leader. I had the opportunity to work with Kristen in my last role. It was nice to see her. Listen, assessments, right? So Becky and I have had a lot of conversations about this. So
That we have.
So last July, I'm going to make it analogous to probably one of the toughest times in my life when we had to make decisions about reopening schools. And let me just be very clear. My wife works in 2 middle schools with 700 students each. And my children attend a high school. Both children attend a high school with over 1,000 students in it. So those decisions that I was making as Commissioner of Education were decisions that I were making for my own children, my own wife. And so very, very difficult decisions. And I knew that no matter how we moved, there were going to be major opposition to whatever decision was made. And we had to lead knowing that. We're trusting our science experts, but that there's no easy solution and there's no one size fits all. I share that with you just to kind of make it analogous to assessments. There's no one size fits all for this. And I will tell you, I remember, and I shared this with Becky, I remember being a principal of an elementary school with beautiful bilingual students who were learning English. They came from Dominican Republic, Mexico, Puerto Rico. And then they came at a time when we had to administer standardized assessments. So I remember looking at a young lady named Stephanie, sitting her down and having her sit through an assessment. I'm thinking to myself, why am I doing this? This makes no sense. And thinking about Stephanie and saying, is this the right approach? Given the fact that she just came into the country, didn't understand English. I have an English assessment. We've evolved a lot since then in terms of language and computer adaptive, but I get it. I get the frustration people feel right now. I get the challenge that this is. We worked really hard. I mean, literally the first week, even before I came on, decisions were being made and communicated. But right when I came on board, it was about how do we offer flexibilities to try to get opportunities for people to see where students are, knowing that standardized assessments are not the end all, and you can learn a lot more as an educator. No educator needs to see in a standardized assessment to know how their kids are doing. Let me make that very clear. Okay, but that's one data point. And I know as we think about how we're distributing 130 billion, soon leaders are going to have to make very difficult decisions to say, this classroom needs a class size of no greater than 9, but this one could go with 21. Why? Because we know where our kids need it the most. But let me just move forward to Kristen's question. I firmly believe as an educator, and before the pandemic in Connecticut, we rolled out this thing called sensible assessments. I wanted to remove anything that's done just to get pretty charts or just to have a nice line graph somewhere so that somebody can put it up. That's not helping kids. Why are we assessing? Is it helping us improve instruction? Is it helping us learn how we can support students? If not, we need to really take a step back. And I think, unfortunately, over the last 10, 20 years, I've seen there be an over-reliance on assessments. And what I've seen also as an educator is the narrowing of curriculum or the narrowing of programs. So students who need more STEM, who need more arts, who need more of those opportunities are getting less of it because the pedagogy is aimed to prepare for the assessment. We have it backwards. Assessments, really well done assessments, you shouldn't even know you're taking them. They should mirror good instruction. They should be real-time assessments. So there's a lot of work to be done. I guarantee that that's something that we're going to be discussing and seeing how we can improve assessments so they really reflect student learning, but that we honor the profession by saying we need good teaching. Everything has to start with good pedagogy, good teaching, connecting students. The one example that I think of is bilingual education, where you bring in realia, where you have a lot of models and you have role playing and students talking a lot, and then you go to a bubble test. That doesn't make sense to me. So there's work to be done. I'm eager to do that work, but I'm also eager to make sure that there are authentic senses of accountability and making sure that we're assessing where our students are, but in a real way. And these are conversations that I look forward to having with NEA at the table from the beginning, not to co-sign what we like and say, hey, here, co-sign this. But yes, Kristen, to answer your question, this is something that I look forward to discussing as we talk about improving the instructional core and making sure that we're assessing students authentically and not over-assessing for the sake of assessments.
Thank you, Secretary Cardona. I don't think you'll be surprised in knowing that we have lots of ideas on what those more complete, authentic assessments should look like. And we certainly are going to be working very, very closely with you to make sure that the voices of educators who are working with our students every day and know their names are having those conversations so that we can guide that work. Our next question comes from an education support professional from my home state of Pennsylvania. Let's hear the second question.
Hello, I'm Dolores Gales, a paraprofessional from Braddock, Pennsylvania. Since the beginning of the pandemic, educators have been calling on Congress to provide the resources needed to help our students continue learning during and coming out of this pandemic. Thanks to the advocacy and President Biden's leadership, Congress passed the American Rescue Plan that included this funding. Now that the money is going to the state and local schools, how are you working to ensure governors and local school districts are using the funding to best help our students?
Dr. Cardona?
Thank you, Dolores, and thank you for your work. When I was a school principal, I relied so heavily on my amazing paraprofessionals, paraeducators, and the amazing work that they do supporting our students, our educators, and our school community. So thank you, Dolores, for what you do. You're absolutely right. We have a president that gets it. It helps to have a first lady that's a teacher in the White House, right? We have a president that gets it. There's a level of urgency coming from President Biden to make sure we get it right. And not only recover from the pandemic, but address some of those ills that have plagued our profession for years. Immediately the American Rescue Plan is aimed at addressing that. And the question that Dolores asked is a good one. How do we know that the money is going to make it to the classrooms as quickly as possible? Just today, we released an application for states to share what their plans are going to be and what their plans entail. And I want that information to be public. I want you to see it. I want there to be a stakeholder engagement process to make sure that there's different voices at the table. I want those plans to have your fingerprints on them. It's critically important that we come together. That sense of urgency that we had when we collaborated to try to find out how to safely reopen schools, we should not let that go. We should maintain that level of urgency and collaboration to make sure that we're putting forward a plan that has equity written all over it, that is really aimed at addressing the gaps that were exacerbated by the pandemic. So those plans need to be transparent. They need to be posted. We're working with governors to make sure the maintenance of effort is there. We put out guidance last week to make sure that the money is going toward to support schools, not to supplant funding that would have been there before. That's critically important, that we work with our partners in governors' offices, and they've been really good. They came to the table early on and said, we want to be a part of this process. So I appreciate the NGA specifically for stepping up and saying, we want to be a part of this process. We recognize the importance of ensuring that this money goes to our schools. So we're going to make sure that happens. We're going to work with our states and work with our governors' offices and make sure that the money is going toward the students, and especially those students that were hit most. I know difficult decisions are going to have to be made to make sure that we're putting that funding to help all children, but we're making sure that we're addressing those gaps that were exacerbated due to this pandemic.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. And I want to lift up something you just said, because the NEA worked very closely with the department on this. As some of you know on the line, the department does issue guidance, and as they issue guidance around this issue, the expenditure of the money, what Dr. Cardona just talked about, getting the input and voice of educators and those who represent them. We work closely with the department to ensure that that actually is codified in that guidance. So I just want to say to folks listening on the line, please know that it is the expectation of the department that you are involved in a meaningful way. And so we're asking that you ask questions and you make sure that as decisions are being made, that you are involved in that decision making, because that's the guidance that came out from the department.
And, let me double down on that. We need to, when we talk about reorganizing schools or reimagining, or listen, we need to make sure that as we move forward, if those structures don't exist already, we need to make structures for ongoing collaboration, dialogue, aimed at ensuring that our students get what they need as quickly as possible with the input of all stakeholders. So if that process doesn't exist, it needs to exist. This is unprecedented. The amount of funds that we're sending to schools, we need to make sure we're good stewards of that. And that includes, that requires bringing people together. I want to, Dolores's question made me think of something else that we really need to start with. We need to work on building a sense of trust and confidence in the Department of Education. I recognize a lot of people, even prior to the pandemic, are feeling burned or feeling hurt or feeling pushed aside. Through our actions more than our words, I hope that you recognize that this is a new day, and I look forward to working with our teachers and our educators. I look forward to listening, and we may not always end up at the same spot, but I know what it felt like to be in a classroom and feel like, man, I wish they knew this. I wish they heard this. So not only myself, but throughout our agency, we're going to make sure we're working closely with our partners in the field, because our job is to help support you so you can be successful helping children.
Thank you for adding that, Dr. Cardona. And for those who are on the line with us and those who weren't able to join us, we will actually put out some information about the work that NEA is leading on at the national level and at the state and local level around labor management collaboration. Dr. Cardona, I've shared that with you. That we announced a new partnership around that, but it actually addresses and provides a toolkit for our leaders, our members, to develop in collaboration those processes and systems and structures to sustain that collaboration. So thank you for sharing that additional information. So we have another question up. It's on the screen, or we're putting it up on the screen from Michelle. And he is from Ohio. And his question is, due to the pandemic, some students are behind academically. What will you do to help students get back on track?
Thank you, Michelle, for the question. Many of our students are significantly affected academically. But I'll tell you, in order to get to the academic piece, we have to start with where the students are. So in order to get to academic success, we have to start with the social emotional well-being. It's hard to learn if you're grieving. It's hard to learn if your teeth hurt. It's hard to learn if you're hungry. It's hard to learn if you're not sure where you're sleeping at night. So the pandemic created a lot of these issues in families and communities. And our students, when we welcome our students back, let's not make the mistake of turning on the lights and thinking just because they have masks on, we could turn to page 35. It's a new day. We have to make sure we're designing our schools to welcome our students to come back after such a traumatic experience that they experienced, some worse than others, and make sure not only our students, but our educators are able to come back and their social emotional well-being guides the decisions that we're making. And then when we have a system set up where we're meeting the students where they are socially and emotionally, then we have to really make sure we're supporting them and accelerating learning through great opportunities, both in the schoolhouse, outside of the schoolhouse, after hours, but that could be non-traditional forms. For me, summer learning could be opening up the museums in your community, giving students passes to them, having docents there, having them write about things, compare different things that they saw in museums, access to recreational activities. We need to be creative in how we get these students back in. But first and foremost, that relational piece has to be addressed. People talk about writing, reading, and arithmetic. For me, that fourth R is most important, relationships. If we can get that right, the learning will come and the acceleration will come. I think similarly, so that's the most important thing for me. but we also have to make sure that we're looking at how we're implementing curriculum. What did they miss? How are we compacting that? How are we putting it in? What are the standards that we know our students need? How are we raising the bar on professional learning opportunities for our educators so that we don't expect our students to come back and just go and catch up. We can't expect that of our educators either. So how are we designing professional learning opportunities, curriculum compacting, so that teachers are not trying to scramble and say, okay, what do I have to teach now and how do I do it? There's funding here for that support. So it's not only about supporting our students for academic success, but helping prepare our educators to give those students those resources that they need.
Thank you, Dr. Cardona. I'm really glad that you led with all of the other learning that has to occur. So it's not just academic, but it's social and emotional, and the supports we need to do that. And not just our students too. That's one thing we've learned this year, right? That our educators need that support as well. So we have another pre-recorded video question from Michigan.
Hello, I'm Nick Valenti, a higher education faculty member from Northville, Michigan, and proud member of the Michigan Education Association. As you know, too often in this country, the cost of college forces many students and families to forego their education goals or be trapped in a lifetime of debt. This issue particularly impacts Black, Brown, and Indigenous students. And since Black students on average owe about $4,700 more than white students, the issue of student debt impacts our classrooms, making it harder to diversify the teaching workforce. So, as Secretary of Education, how will you expand and ensure access to more student debt cancellation? And specifically, how will you ensure that public service workers have a clear pathway to the loan forgiveness they were promised?
Mr.
Thank you for
Secretary?
that question, Nick. That's a great question. And, you know, I was a first-gen college student myself, and I knew I had to make very difficult decisions when getting paid in my part-time job and how to pay for school. And as I said earlier in my talk, you know, we can't expect that first-generation college students go to college and take on this massive debt and be you know, weighed down by this debt for the rest of their life. That's unacceptable. And as you pointed out, Nick, there are subgroups of students that are disproportionately affected by that. So we need to work on this. So public loan, the loan forgiveness, you know, we're working closely with the White House and to try to see how we can help support our learners and the loans that they have now. You know, they're on pause now, but eventually those loans either have to be paid or there has to be some way to support our students, many of whom were impacted negatively by the pandemic. So we're working very closely on that. We have done some things recently to help some of our borrowers who are probably some of those that are most in need. Like last month, we announced relief to borrowers who have received student loan discharges due to total and permanent disabilities. It was over $1.3 billion in relief to students. There were a couple other things that we've done to really help those who are in greatest need, and we're going to continue to look at ways to help. Let me share something with you. In 2017, you mentioned the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. When that program became available, 98% of those who applied for public service loan forgiveness were rejected. 98%. We need to do better. We need to do better. We at the agency have the authority to revisit that and make sure that we're honoring those who choose to engage in public service by providing loan forgiveness in a way that's a lot better than 2% approval. We owe it to our students to do better. That's a priority for me. I'm committed to making sure not only that we attract students to college, but also make sure that it's affordable so that when students graduate college, they can go on and buy a home or start with their life and not feel like they have this heavy burden on them. And as you said, the burden is most prominent for Black and Brown borrowers. You know, I read recently Black students who graduate college 12 years later they are in greater debt than they were when they took out the loan because of the interest that accrues and their inability to pay the principal based on trying to get through college. So it's real. It's a real problem. And if we don't address it boldly and aggressively, it's going to perpetuate these gaps that exist in higher education. We're on it, Nick. We're on it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. So we have another question that we had submitted. So let's take a look at that one. What policies do you plan to put in place to support all educators as the expert professionals they are? Yeah. Did you ever have the feeling, Dr. Cardona, that anyone and everyone who attended school thought they were experts, as though we didn't study and become professionals? Did you ever have that feeling?
Let me tell you, since day one, right? So hopefully after this pandemic, there's a newfound appreciation for the amazing work that educators do day in and day out. But I hear you. I went to school. This is how it worked. There's actually, there's something to be said about people who really think that way. And we have to. That's what I said. We have to control the narrative, Becky. We have to control the narrative and show what we are doing and show how our educators are amazing and meeting students where they are at all different levels and working with families in ways that in the past was never even thought of. But, to answer that question, it brings me back when I was a fourth grade teacher. I kind of had a chip on my shoulder all the time, I had to prove something, right? I had to defend the profession, yet no other profession is possible without education. So yes, I kind of still have that. And, I kind of feel like, well, first of all, we got to pay our educators what they're worth. It's unacceptable in 2021 for teachers to have a second job because the first job doesn't pay enough. I was reading recently in 30 states, mid-career educators, not beginner teachers, mid-career educators who had families of 4 or more qualify for federal assistance programs like free and reduced lunch. Mid-career educators with families of 4. That's unacceptable. That's unacceptable. So we need to make sure that we're that they have a good compensation, that we're valuing growth opportunities and professional learning opportunities. This profession, we ask so much of our educators. We ask so much. And, we're talking about trauma-informed instruction. We're talking about curriculum compacted. We're talking about formative assessments. We're talking about blended learning. Everybody's a blended learning expert now, right? So I want to make sure that as we move forward in the American Rescue Plan, that some of those resources are aimed at providing opportunities for teachers to have job-embedded professional learning. I'm not talking about, 4 to 8 at night, 3 times a week, or those 3 times a year where you cram everything into one. That's not what I'm talking about. Let's reimagine what it means to honor the profession by providing job-embedded professional learning opportunities. Every other profession does it. It's about time we start thinking creatively and outside of the box. The resources are there. We need to have the will to do it. We need to have the collaboration to do it well. And I know that's only going to help our students, but our profession needs it. So compensation, good professional learning opportunities, good grow your own strategies. When I got my master's degree in bilingual bicultural education, I chose to stay in the classroom that I was teaching, which is not a bilingual education classroom. I love bilingual education teachers, by the way. They're amazing. But I chose to stay in the mainstream classroom because I really felt like my Latino students and my non-Latino students needed to see teachers of color. Teachers, different cultures, and it's okay. And I really felt that passion. So I think in honoring the profession, we also have to look at grow your own programs. I saw Dolores, the paraeducator there, and I'm thinking to myself, how can we start more systematically creating grow your own programs? Because we have paraeducators, we have climate specialists, we have folks that are in our schools that choose to be in those schools, people of color, and they just need an opportunity to have a pipeline to get into the profession and become certified teachers and continue to grow in their career. So there's so many different things we could do, mentorship programs. There's a lot we can do, but I don't have all the answers. The question is, how can we work together to make sure that we continue to honor the profession by lifting it and supporting our educators so that they can support our students?
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and thank you for generously extending your time with us because of the technical difficulties we had at the beginning. So that's going to allow us to take another question from Linda. Could you put that up on the screen? What is your plan to serve students with special needs and to fulfill the promises made to them at the federal level?
Thank you. Thank you, Linda, for that question. You know, one of the first things I'm going to do is make sure that the talent that I bring into the agency share the same belief that I have, that our students with disabilities are first students that need to access the general education curriculum, that they should not be defined as students with disabilities. They're students with abilities, and they have their assets, and they bring so much to the table. And we have to think about shifting that frame, that way of thinking. While they have special needs in terms of how they learn, they also bring a lot to the table. So ensuring access to quality tier 1 curriculum first, and then specializing instruction. Ensuring that there's funding for IDEA. It seems like there's never enough to provide the support that our students need. And then we wonder why they're not making the progress that they need to make, or why special education teachers whose caseloads are too high for them to be able to really meaningfully help students grow, why we have that challenge. Why our regular education classroom teachers feel sometimes that they lack confidence in their own abilities to meet the needs of these learners because maybe the professional learning hasn't been there. There's a lot we can do. Funding it in a way where we can provide the support for the educators, for the students, is critically important, but ensuring we have the right mindset to make sure that we're looking at all of our students as assets who have the ability to learn, ability to grow, ability to enhance the community in which they learn. That's the first thing we have to do. Funding it, making sure we have best practices out there, making sure students have access to quality tier 1 curriculum. Because what happens is if all they're being exposed to is intervention or remediation somewhere else, they're never getting access to quality content. How do we do that in a way that gives it to them in the way that they learn best? High expectations, appropriate funding, appropriate training, and the students will continue to shine.
So thank you so much, Mr. Secretary. It's so good to have you with us. We have so many more questions that come from our members, from how we're going to ensure that all of our students have access to healthy, and their families, by the way, and that we saw that in the pandemic, to meals, to healthy meals, to how we are going to elevate the teaching profession, to provide the kinds of professional development for our education support professionals so that they can continue not only their learning journey, but continue to absolutely have impact on our students. And as I think about the question that you answered around the higher education question around student loans, that it's critically important that we not only talk about that debt, but we also talk about the millions of dollars public colleges and universities pay just to service high interest privately financed debt, which should be publicly funded at low interest rates or at no interest rate. And that would free up so much needed and valuable resources to invest in our students and our staff and our faculty. So much more to talk about, right? And I trust this will not be our only opportunity to hear from you and for you to hear from our members. I know that that's going to happen and continue to happen. So I really want to thank you for joining us this evening and listening and learning from us, and for us learning from you.
It truly is a partnership. If I can just say, it's truly a partnership. We're going to continue to do this. It's important that we reflect the work that we do, reflect what's happening in the field, and who better than our educators to hear from. I will say our food and nutrition workers have been rock stars, superheroes. They deserve capes. They've fed millions and millions and millions of students and families since day one of the pandemic. They were serving meals in March of last year, April, all over the summer. Thank you. Thank you for helping those children eat and have warm meals. And then it's Administrative Professionals Day. So shout out to all the administrative assistants who, this recovery and this reopening wouldn't be possible if it weren't for them. Thank you for what they do. And you said it, Becky, there's so much more to do in higher education, in pre-K-12. And I know that I'm going to end with what I started with. Let us not lose the sense of urgency. My window as Secretary of Education is short. The urgency in the pandemic and the opportunity that we have right now is so big. Let's take every moment to work together to go as far as we can for our students and change the trajectory, especially with those Black and brown students who historically have always been underperforming. We have the responsibility and the opportunity to change that right now. I look forward to doing it with your partnership and the support of the educators across the country. I look forward to working with you and serving our students the best we can. Thank you for having me tonight.
Thank you so much. We're inspired by your story and your journey to this amazing position, and most especially your dedication to equity and to excellence. And we appreciate that you have already and will continue to visit us in our schools and in our school sites. Please don't forget to visit those bus barns too, Mr. Secretary. We're doing some exciting things with clean buses. And so we want you to get an opportunity to see the kinds of things we are leading on in every aspect of our union. For everyone who tuned in, I just want to thank you for watching or listening to our conversation. You already know that these issues touch all of us, ensuring that our students have the resources and support so they can heal, so they can thrive, takes the commitment and sometimes demanding that we have the kind of collaboration and support and resources, encouragement, so that all of our students can live into their magnificent brilliance. I know that that's something that we can do together. At the outset, Dr. Cardona heard me say, and not all of you did, as we had our technical difficulties. I want to remind you of something that Dr. King reminded us of many decades ago, that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Change takes a long time, but it does happen, but it only happens when we make the commitment to bending that arc. Yesterday's decision, the verdict in seeking justice for George Floyd, was but one tiny step. We have so much more work to do to ensure that every single one of our students, everyone, has the opportunity to attend a high quality public education that is designed to be equitable, to provide that equitable access and opportunity, to be racially and socially just, to ensure that this country lives up to its ideals. When we say we the people, we mean we, all of us. Thank you again, Mr. Secretary, for spending time with us. Thank you for the work we will do together. And NEA members and everyone else that has joined us today, please stay safe and continue to do the extraordinary work you are doing that reflects we will be worthy of our students. Thank you and good night.
Good night, everyone.